Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Today, we're venturing into the darkest corners of one of the most controversial houses at Hogwarts, Slytherin. This house is shrouded in rumors, myths, and prejudices. But what if we don't just recall the snake's den, but actually take a critical look at it? In this video, the strangest and most controversial aspects of Slytherin. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Why do children live in a dungeon? Gryffindors enjoy panoramic views from their tower. Ravenclaws are also housed above. Hufflepuffs are cozily nestled near the kitchens. But Slytherins, they live in the dungeons. Damp, dark dungeons. Why? Why are children made to live in a space that feels more like a prison than a common room? No windows, no sunlight. According to Hermione, the Slytherin common room resembles a snake pit, cold, gloomy, isolated. Did no one at Hogwarts ever consider that spending nearly 7 years in such an environment might affect a teenager's mental health? Number 2. Why did Slytherin always have as many students as the other houses? Let's talk about the even distribution. In the films especially, it's noticeable. Each house seems to have roughly the same number of students. But how? Do the same percentage of brave, ambitious, smart, and hard-working kids get sorted each year? Is it really just coincidence? Or is the sorting hat simply splitting things evenly to keep balance? If that's the case, then the student's traits seem secondary, and the system starts to look more like a quota. If any child can potentially go to any house, then what's the true point of the sorting? Number 3. How did Crabbe and Goyle end up in Slytherin? As you grow older, more questions arise, like, how did people like Crabbe and Goyle get into Slytherin? They're not especially smart, they don't show ambition, they're not cunning. Even their loyalty to Malfoy feels more like blind obedience. If sorting is based on personality traits, why Slytherin? Such cases break the logic of house divisions. Or could it be that Slytherin's true criteria aren't what we were told? Number 4. Is Slytherin the house for dark wizards? Here's a troubling question. Why are so many dark wizards former Slytherins? Coincidence or consequence? If Slytherin is supposed to be for the ambitious and driven, why do these traits so often twist into a hunger for power and evil? Or maybe the problem isn't the students, but how others treat them. Maybe the very act of separating them and stigmatizing them from childhood pushes them toward darkness. Perhaps Slytherin didn't become the house of outcasts by choice, but because of how the rest of the school sees them. Number 5. Prejudice. One of the most blatant examples in the scene in Deathly Hallows. Voldemort demands Harry be handed over, and Pansy Parkinson suggests they give him up. What does Professor McGonagall do? She removes all Slytherins from the Great Hall. All of them. Down to the dungeons, not just kicked out, but isolated as if they were all traitors. What if some of them wanted to stay and fight for Hogwarts? This scene is the very definition of prejudice. Even the wisest teachers fall into the trap of seeing Slytherin as a threat by default. Number 6. How did Snape become head of house? Severus. Snape is a controversial figure. Despite ultimately being a hero, throughout 7 books he behaves in ways that would, in a real school, spark concern among parents and administrators. He bullies students, shows open favoritism, and displays classroom behavior that borders on abusive. Yet he's still made head of house. And no one questions his fitness as a mentor. Why? Maybe it's because he was one of their own? Or maybe the magical world has a real problem with educational standards? Number 7, Salazar Slytherin and the Chamber of Secrets. And finally, the founder himself. A man who believed Muggleborns shouldn't be allowed at Hogwarts. He created the Chamber of Secrets. He hid a giant basilisk inside. And none of the other founders, not Gryffindor, not Ravenclaw, not Hufflepuff, noticed one of their own digging out secret chambers beneath the school. How is it possible that for centuries No one at the school knew a deadly monster was slithering beneath students' feet. This isn't just a mystery, it's a catastrophic failure of safety and trust. Number 8. Is blood purity a rule or just a tradition? Salazar Slytherin once refused to teach Muggle-borns. That belief, carved into the foundation of his house, echoed for centuries. But then came Severus Snape, half-blood, son of a Muggle father, sorted into Slytherin without hesitation, not just accepted, he thrived there, became head of house, became trusted by pure blood fanatics, the same ones who would curse his blood if he stood on the wrong side of a wand. So was blood status ever truly a rule, or just a myth used when convenient? Draco Malfoy, raised on blood purity doctrine, never questioned Snape's heritage. He worshipped him, called him the best teacher at Hogwarts. The house that prided itself on legacy allowed exceptions, quiet ones, selective ones. The Sorting Hat never promised purity, it promised ambition, cunning, resourcefulness. Maybe the pure blood ideal was never a requirement, just an illusion, a tradition passed down like an heirloom, tarnished, outdated, but never questioned, because questioning it meant unraveling everything the house was told to protect. Number 9. Why wasn't the house shut down after Voldemort's fall? After the Battle of Hogwarts, the castle was shattered, lives lost, families broken, and yet when the rubble cleared, Slytherin House stood untouched, same colours, same emblem, same shadow. No apology, no reform, no explanation. Students returned the next year to the same house that had produced Tom Riddle, Bellatrix Lestrange, and nearly every Death Eater in the war. No one questioned it aloud, not even Kingsley Shacklebolt, now minister, as if the war never happened in those dungeons. Was it fear, tradition, or just the quiet weight of history? The school could have changed, it could have merged the houses, rebuilt unity, but instead it chose silence. A silence that told every new Slytherin, you are your house, and your house is your legacy. We Slytherins are brave, yes, but not stupid, said Phineas Nigellus Black. That mindset remained, and with it, the danger of letting a house with blood on its hands carry on, unchallenged, under the green and silver banner. Number 10. Why are Slytherins allowed to study dark magic unchecked? Draco Malfoy knew how to cast the Cruciatus Curse before he finished 6th year. He brewed deadly poisons. He repaired a vanishing cabinet used to smuggle Death Eaters into the castle. No one stopped him. No detention. No investigation. Just whispers. He's just a boy, Dumbledore said once. But boys don't walk around with cursed objects and murder on their minds. And yet Draco did, under the very noses of his professors. Other Slytherins weren't far behind. Pansy talked about blood status like it was law. Theo Knott handled dark artifacts inherited from his father. No teacher stepped in. No lesson warned them that darkness feeds on silence. Hogwarts banned dark arts, but not dark knowledge. The line blurred, and the staff let it blur. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they hoped Slytherins would grow out of it. But ignoring the storm doesn't stop it. It just makes the thunder louder. Number 11. Why didn't any Slytherins fight for Hogwarts? When the final battle came, Slytherin House vanished. Not a single green-robed student stood among the defenders. The great hall echoed with Gryffindor cheers, Hufflepuff courage, Ravenclaw resolve, but Slytherin was silent. After Pansy Parkinson's outburst, McGonagall dismissed the entire house. No one protested. No one stepped forward. It was as if they didn't belong, as if they never had. But could every Slytherin truly have chosen to run? It's impossible to believe that all of them supported Voldemort. What about Daphne Greengrass, or Blaise Zabini, who was always more vain than violent? What about the younger years, the ones barely 13, who never made a choice at all? Even the book gives them no voice. Their absence isn't just strange, it's damaging. It suggests there was no goodness left in Slytherin, no spark of defiance, no single heart brave enough to rise. That's not realistic. That's a narrative choice. Slughorn fought, eventually. He led a group of reinforcements into the final charge. But where were his students? Where was his influence? Why didn't he return with half his house behind him? He knew the war wasn't about bloodlines. He knew what Riddle had become. Yet he offered no rallying cry, no message of redemption. In a moment that could have rewritten Slytherin's story, the silence was louder than the battle. Number 12. The Strange Role of Horace Slughorn. Horace Slughorn was not cruel like Snape. He didn't terrorize students or play favorites with a sneer. Instead, he offered tea, candied pineapple, and laughter. But behind that warm smile was a sharp eye for power. His famous Slug Club was more than a social group. It was a network, carefully crafted, carefully chosen. Tom Riddle sat at one of those early dinners, charming and polite. Slughorn beamed. "A remarkable boy," he once said. And then, with barely a flicker of guilt, gave him the knowledge to create a Horcrux. Slughorn never invited Luna Lovegood, never considered Neville Longbottom, but he welcomed Cormac McLaggen and Blaise Zabini, boys with names, wealth, and connections, not because they were kind, not because they were brave, but because they might one day be important. That's what the club taught. Worth isn't earned through integrity or friendship, but through pedigree. And Hogwarts let it happen. Year after year. He meant well, perhaps. He told Harry, "I like having famous people in my club." He chuckled, brushing it off. But what kind of message does that send to the rest of the students? That only the loud, the rich, or the promising get noticed? Slughorn may not have worn black robes or cast unforgivable curses, but his quiet favoritism carved just as deep. Number 13. Why didn't Hogwarts try to improve Slytherin's reputation? At the end of the Battle of Hogwarts, while the dust still settled and the dead were being counted, no one spoke of Slytherin. Not of the students who fled, not of the silence in their common room. When Professor McGonagall ordered the entire house to be sent away before the fight began, she didn't pause. She said it clearly. Send all Slytherins to the dungeons. Not just Pansy Parkinson, not just the ones who agreed with Voldemort. All of them. That wasn't discipline. That was exile. For centuries, the school allowed this division to fester. No public effort was made to rebuild the house's image, no special mentorship, no outreach, no ceremony to show the world that Slytherin was more than dark robes and cruel smirks. Even Dumbledore, so wise, so understanding, chose silence. He praised Gryffindor bravery in every speech. He rewarded Neville, Harry, Ron, and Hermione with last-minute points, but never once did he stand before the school and say, "There is good in Slytherin too." The only time Slytherin was mentioned with pride came from Slughorn, and even he handpicked his favourites, collecting talent like trophies. "I like to keep in touch with my old students," he said with a wink. But his affection was selective. His praise was private. There was no campaign to change how others saw the house. No defence of the quiet Slytherins who kept their heads down and their hands clean. They were left in the shadows. Again. And so the legend lived on. Slytherin meant danger. It meant selfishness. It meant ambition twisted into poison. But what if, long ago, someone had stood up and said, "This house deserves better"? What if Hogwarts had cared enough to teach the world that cunning isn't the same as cruelty, and ambition doesn't have to end in war? No one ever did. And that silence may have been the school's greatest failure. Number 14. Why does the Sorting Hat keep sending students to Slytherin? The Sorting Hat sat on Harry Potter's head and murmured, "You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head. And Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that." It knew exactly who Tom Riddle had been. It knew what became of dark students who once walked Slytherin's stone corridors, and yet it still tried to push Harry in the same direction. This wasn't a moment of confusion. The Hat made a conscious choice. It saw ambition, it saw power, and it offered Slytherin like a secret promise. But how many promises turned to poison? Tom Riddle had been sorted without question, no warning, no caution, and soon he became Lord Voldemort. Bellatrix Lestrange, too, a pure-blood extremist with madness in her eyes, wore Slytherin green. Alongside her stood Antonin Dolohov and Evan Rosier, names carved into the heart of every Death Eater list. The hat must have known. It must have felt the chill in those minds, yet it welcomed them again and again. What if the hat doesn't judge morality at all? What if it doesn't care about good or evil? Maybe its only duty is to identify traits, ambition, cunning, resourcefulness, and assign a place accordingly, regardless of consequences. But then what is its role in protecting the school, in shaping the future? Hogwarts isn't just a building, it's where young minds are molded. And if the first magical experience a child has is being sorted into the house that raised a dark army, shouldn't that decision carry more weight? The more you look, the harder it becomes to ignore. Why does the sorting hat continue this pattern, fully aware of Slytherin's legacy? Why does it gamble with lives? It saw the darkness in Harry and tried to hand him over to it. He refused, but how many didn't? Maybe the hat serves more than just the school. Maybe it serves a deeper design, or maybe, just maybe, it's been making mistakes for centuries and no one dares question it. Number 15. Why do Slytherins rarely socialize with other houses? The Slytherin table in the Great Hall always felt just a little colder than the rest, even in the glow of floating candles. Tucked away at the far edge, the students in green and silver rarely cast glances toward the other three tables unless it was with suspicion or disdain. It wasn't just rivalry, it was detachment, a curious distance that grew more and more visible with each passing year. Unlike Gryffindors, who shared laughs with Hufflepuffs or discussed homework with Ravenclaws, the Slytherins remained in their own orbit. Not even shared classes, Quidditch matches, or the occasional crisis seemed enough to truly bridge the gap. And for a school that proudly claimed to foster unity and growth, this silent segregation seemed almost institutional. From the first moment Harry Potter met Draco Malfoy in the Philosopher's Stone, the tone was set. Draco's casual insult of Hagrid and his blatant disdain for the wrong sort of people already hinted at the exclusivity that would define Slytherin. But the deeper truth wasn't just about Draco being elitist, it was how quickly the Slytherin identity absorbed and reinforced that behavior. Within days of sorting, Slytherins were already a distinct unit, bound not just by shared values, but by isolation. Where was the inter-house mentorship, the cross-faculty camaraderie? The school offered none. Take, for instance, the Yule Ball in the Goblet of Fire. The ball was a rare opportunity for students to cross social and house boundaries. Parvati and Padma Patil attended with Harry and Ron. Gryffindor and Ravenclaw mingled freely. Even Hermione arrived with Victor Crumb, a Durmstrang student. And yet, not a single Slytherin student was depicted interacting significantly with someone outside their house. Pansy Parkinson stuck with Draco. The other Slytherin boys clustered in the corner. There was no narrative effort to even pretend that these students might seek connection outside their closed circle. It goes beyond social choice and enters into the domain of narrative design. When Luna Lovegood, a Ravenclaw, was introduced, she became close friends with the Gryffindor trio. Cedric Diggory, a proud Hufflepuff, worked alongside Harry during the Triwizard Tournament. But no Slytherin was ever afforded that space. Blaise Zabini, Daphne Greengrass, Millicent Bulstrode, names that remained background noise, mentioned but never developed. Why were these students never given arcs that intersected meaningfully with others? During the Battle of Hogwarts in the Deathly Hallows, Professor McGonagall offered the Slytherins a choice: stay and fight, or leave. It was a test of courage, of loyalty, not to Voldemort or even Hogwarts, but to their peers. And yet, their collective response was to walk away. "Let's all just leave, shall we?" Pansy Parkinson snapped, suggesting the handover of Harry to Voldemort. Not one Slytherin student stood up and said no, not one remained. Even if, later, some returned with reinforcements, off-page, off-focus, the initial reaction was mass retreat. What message does that send about their integration into the school's larger community? This estrangement wasn't limited to battles or formal events. In the Half-Blood Prince, when Slughorn's exclusive Slug Club met, students from multiple houses mingled. Ginny Weasley, Hermione Granger, Cormac McLaggen, Marcus Belby, there was diversity. But while Slughorn was himself a former Slytherin, he curiously avoided inviting current Slytherin students into the fold, Draco being the notable exception, and even that was treated with unease. It was as if being from Slytherin carried a stigma too potent for even his selective club. Was this the school's failure, or the author's? Slytherin's common room is hidden beneath the Black Lake, an architectural metaphor that cannot be ignored. While Gryffindors and Ravenclaws perch in high towers, and Hufflepuffs are tucked near the kitchen, warm and welcoming, Slytherins dwell underground, surrounded by water and shadows. It's under the lake, with greenish lamps and skulls, Harry described after Polyjuice Potion took him into their space. This physical separation from the rest of the school compounds the emotional one. Students who already lean toward ambition and cunning are given a lair, not a home, and are told implicitly that their interactions should stay within. The only significant moment when a Slytherin and a Gryffindor form any real connection is between Snape and Lily Evans. And that, too, ends in bitterness. Snape's use of the word mudblood severs the friendship forever. Despite all the years of shared childhood, Hogwarts sorting divides them permanently. Lily finds friends in Gryffindor. Snape falls deeper into the shadows of Slytherin. The divide is not just personal, it is systemic, the house system itself, the chisel that breaks apart connections. Even in the Quidditch pitch, where rivalries should have felt invigorating, Slytherin was cast as the antagonist. Their tactics were not merely competitive, they were described as dirty or unsporting. Marcus Flint smashed into people, Draco insulted players mid-air. The other teams might have rivalries, but Slytherin was portrayed as the team to despise. There's a reason the Gryffindor victory over them in Prisoner of Azkaban felt like a narrative high. It wasn't just a sports win, it was a moral triumph over pettiness and cruelty. In Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's army, a secret organization of students across houses, forms to resist Umbridge. Members included Luna, Cho, Ernie, Justin, Parvati, and more. But not a single Slytherin was invited or expressed interest. Were they all so loyal to the Ministry, or had the cultural division become so entrenched that no one even considered asking them? Even as the school faced tyranny, the ideological rift remained untouched. And that seems less like student behavior and more like institutional design. When Draco Malfoy spends most of Half-Blood Prince wandering alone, plotting dark magic, even his own housemates seem distant. Crabbe and Goyle disguise themselves to protect him, but no one truly connects with Draco. He's isolated not just from other houses, but from his peers. Compare this with Harry, who is constantly surrounded by support, advice, and challenge from his friends in Gryffindor, and even those outside it. Slytherin, again, stands alone. Number 16. Why were Snape's potions never monitored? Severus Snape ruled the dungeon classroom like a shadowy monarch, his long black robes billowing as he glided between the workbenches. He demanded silence, precision, and an almost unnatural level of discipline. He never raised his voice, yet even the boldest Gryffindors seemed to shrink beneath his gaze. Over the years, he became the embodiment of potions at Hogwarts, untouchable and unquestioned. Yet beneath this reverence lay something unsettling. No one ever seemed to verify what, exactly, he was teaching his Slytherin favorites. The potions curriculum existed in the dark, like many of Snape's creations, and no one, neither Dumbledore nor the Ministry nor the Board of Governors, appeared to probe it. The notion of trust was central to Dumbledore's leadership. He believed in second chances, in redemption, and above all, in personal choice. But that trust extended so deeply to Severus Snape gave him unchecked control over one of the most dangerous branches of magical education. Potions are not like charms or transfiguration. They carry risks that go beyond mishaps or comedic failures. One misstep and a student could fall into a coma, lose control of their bodily functions, or worse, die. Even in a world filled with magic, potions stand apart as tools of silent power, and the man wielding that power answered to no one. Snape's favoritism towards Slytherin students was no secret. He bullied Neville Longbottom, mocked Hermione Granger, and tormented Harry Potter at every turn. But in contrast, he offered soft encouragements to Draco Malfoy, Pansy Parkinson, and other Slytherins. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, we see Draco excused from his academic duties with a mere nod. "Professor Snape said I could go," Draco tells Slughorn, "and no one questions it." How many times did this happen under Snape's own watch? And what precisely did he allow them to learn in those quiet private moments in the dungeon? Potions like Amitentia, Veritaserum, and Polyjuice are heavily regulated by the Ministry. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, we're reminded that Polyjuice potion takes a month to brew and requires restricted ingredients like lacewing flies and boomslang skin. Snape, entrusted with the school's stores, was also the one who noticed their theft in the second book. "Someone has been stealing boomslang skin and gillyweed," he reports. But what if the supplier and the thief were not different people? What if knowledge of such ingredients was shared only with those he deemed worthy? The Slytherin common room, hidden beneath the lake, became a sanctuary not just of house loyalty, but of privileged information. Snape's role as both head of house and potions master gave him unrivaled access to shape the future of his students in secret ways. The line between education and indoctrination becomes dangerously thin when one teacher has the sole authority to decide who learns what. Unlike Transfiguration, which had a clear ministry-approved structure under McGonagall, Potions under Snape was shrouded in ambiguity. What textbooks did he use? What lessons were written in ink? And which ones whispered through clenched teeth? Even the contents of advanced potion-making, the textbook used in Harry's 6th year, were altered in Snape's own hand. Harry stumbles upon the Half-Blood Prince's copy and follows his notes, which lead him to a level of success he had never known in class. One spell in the margins, Sectum Sempra, turns out to be a violent curse that slashes open its target. Snape created it. Harry uses it on Draco, nearly killing him. If this was left in the margins of a book, what might have been taught behind closed doors? The Half-Blood Prince's annotations raise an even darker question: how much of Snape's curriculum was official and how much improvised? While Hogwarts has oversight over the Defense Against the Dark Arts post, so much that it was said to be cursed, there was no sign that the potions position received similar scrutiny. Yet potions can produce death, loyalty, forgetfulness, obedience. Felix Felicis, which grants extraordinary luck, is another example. In the same 6th year, Harry wins a vial by brewing the draught of living death. What would happen if such potions were made accessible to the wrong student? Consider Blaise Zabini, a pure-blood Slytherin of quiet manner and sharp ambition. Nothing in the books points to wrongdoing on his part, but then again, nothing points to oversight either. What potions did Zabini learn under Snape's wing? Were there lessons in manipulation, subtlety, or chemical influence passed off as extra credit? Who documented the extracurriculars in Snape's dungeon? No records are ever mentioned, no inspections, no ministry observers. Even Umbridge, when she enforced her educational decrees, left Snape untouched. Contrast this with how tightly wand usage is regulated. Underage magic is tracked, apparition is licensed. Even magical creatures fall under care of magical creatures inspection guidelines. Yet Snape, master of the most precise and morally grey branch of magic, operated in a vacuum. He decided the pace, the priorities, and the pupils. Would a Gryffindor be allowed to experiment with poisons? Unlikely, but a Slytherin might receive an approving nod for exploring advanced topics. Dumbledore's trust in Snape came at a cost. Not only did he make him a professor, but he empowered him as a gatekeeper to knowledge that shapes minds, poisons bodies, and controls hearts. When Dolores Umbridge inspects the school in Order of the Phoenix, she interrogates Trelawney, bans Hagrid, and monitors Flitwick's class. But Snape? She only asks him why he was denied the defense post. His sarcastic answer, "Apparently I'm not good enough," says more than it seems. Number 17. Why are Slytherins so bad at teamwork? In the darkened halls beneath the Hogwarts dungeons, the flickering green torchlight often reveals more than just the passageways of Slytherin House. It unveils a fundamental contradiction, one that echoes across classrooms, Quidditch pitches, and even the battlefield during the Battle of Hogwarts. For all their pride in ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness, Slytherins consistently fail where teamwork is most needed. The question that haunts the house, like the whispering ghosts of its past, is simple. If Slytherin values networking and using connections, why are its students so profoundly terrible at working together? Nowhere is this more evident than in the way the Slytherin Quidditch team is portrayed. Instead of functioning as a cohesive unit, they revolve around a central figure, usually Draco Malfoy, whose influence is rooted more in privilege and fear than respect and cooperation. The Slytherin team is famous not for strategy but for brute force. Marcus Flint, the team's captain in earlier years, was known for aggression over coordination. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, their win-at-all-costs mentality is made obvious when the team receives new Nimbus 2001s, not because of merit, but because Lucius Malfoy buys them. This move sidelines meritocracy and strategic cohesion in favor of personal gain. It's no longer a team. It's a weapon wielded by Malfoy. In class settings, the problem deepens. Slytherin students rarely collaborate with each other unless their interests align temporarily. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry is sorted into Gryffindor, Draco's first instinct is not to rally a team of equals, but to form a clique of subordinates, Crabbe and Goyle, whose role is purely to obey and enforce. Draco's leadership is not earned, it's claimed. There is no challenge to his authority, no exchange of ideas, only submission. This dynamic mirrors the worst kind of corporate structure: top-down, fear-based, and devoid of innovation. The classroom scenes show similar fractures. In Half-Blood Prince, when Snape assigns practical tasks, Slytherins do not demonstrate coordinated efforts or peer collaboration. There's no sign of cross-brainstorming, no evidence of mentoring younger students, no shared pursuit of excellence. Contrast this with Ravenclaws, who often bond over intellect, or Hufflepuffs, who naturally lean into group effort and mutual support. Slytherins, by contrast, isolate, guarding knowledge as power, hoarding it, rather than using it to elevate their housemates. The irony is sharp. A house that prizes using connections never really builds them in the first place. The deeper irony lies in their values. The Sorting Hat sings that Slytherin will use any means to achieve their ends. In theory, this includes cooperation. After all, building alliances, forging deals, and orchestrating large-scale plans are all essential to success in political and social arenas. But the Slytherin culture seems to distort this into manipulation, not cooperation. We see this most clearly in Tom Riddle, the most infamous Slytherin of all. Even as a student, he didn't build a team. He built a cult. He didn't nurture peers. He enslaved them emotionally and mentally. His friends became Death Eaters not through respect, but through seduction and fear. The lesson absorbed by younger Slytherins is not build a strong team. It's control the people you need. This pattern plays out in Goblet of Fire during the Triwizard Tournament. When Hogwarts becomes a divided front, with Slytherins overwhelmingly supporting Durmstrang's Victor Crumb, there's no unity within the school itself. Instead of backing their own, Slytherins define themselves in opposition to the rest. Their support for Crumb isn't born out of admiration for his skill, but out of spite toward Harry and the houses aligned with him. The choice is not strategic, it's petty. Imagine the potential had Slytherins used this international event to build real bridges. They could have been the facilitators of inter-school diplomacy. Instead, they retreat into tribalism. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries is another missed opportunity. Slytherin students are notably absent from Dumbledore's army. The DA, while technically secret, is known through whispers and rumours. If even a single Slytherin had approached it with genuine interest, they could have brought valuable knowledge and different perspectives. Instead, Marietta Edgecombe, a Ravenclaw, is the only student known to betray the group. Slytherins don't infiltrate to learn, they stay away entirely. In a moment when the school's future hangs in the balance, their absence from both sides speaks volumes. Pansy Parkinson is a textbook case of Slytherin's team dysfunction. She operates not as a contributor, but as a cheerleader of the powerful. Her loyalty to Draco is not built on shared values or common goals, but on social proximity. When it matters, like during Dumbledore's death or the Battle of Hogwarts, Pansy offers no leadership, no strategic insight, and certainly no unity. Her only contribution is attempting to hand Harry over to Voldemort in Deathly Hallows, screaming, "But he's there! Potter's there! Someone grab him!" Her solution is betrayal, not strategy. She doesn't consult others, she commands, and predictably the rest of the school turns against her. Severus Snape himself is a product of this dysfunction. Though he rises to power and plays both sides of the war, Snape's journey is solitary. He builds no allies in school, cultivates no camaraderie. His allegiance to Dumbledore is a personal vendetta masked as noble sacrifice. Even his love for Lily Evans is hidden, secret, and buried under layers of bitterness. His role as head of Slytherin fails to foster collective growth or reform the house's values. He mentors, selectively rewarding quiet obedience over honest teamwork. When he leaves Hogwarts in Deathly Hallows, not a single Slytherin student stands with him or mourns him. His isolation is complete. When the final battle comes to Hogwarts, Slytherin House again chooses isolation. While the other houses rally to protect their school, Slytherins are the only group escorted to the dungeons. It's a narrative moment that says more than dialogue ever could. The books offer the vague explanation that some wanted to fight, but no named Slytherin does. It's a complete failure of unity. In a moment demanding courage, leadership, and solidarity, Slytherins vanish. Even Draco, who has the most at stake, dithers and flees. Instead of leading his peers, he becomes a frightened boy chasing shadows in the room of requirement. Contrast this with the Gryffindor trio, Harry, Hermione, and Ron, whose loyalty to each other overcomes personal conflict, fear, and even betrayal. Their teamwork is messy but resilient, or with the Hufflepuffs whose quiet but unwavering commitment to justice leads many of them to stay and fight. Even Luna Lovegood and the Ravenclaws show a better grasp of collaborative strength. It is not intelligence or bravery that creates victory, but the ability to work together, to trust, to sacrifice. Slytherin's absence is not just noticeable, it's a deafening silence. The root of this problem may lie in the way the house defines success. For Slytherins, success is personal. It is not measured by group outcomes, but by individual advancement. A Slytherin student is rewarded not for helping peers, but for outperforming them. This breeds a culture where sharing knowledge is dangerous and helping others is risky. If you help your classmate brew a perfect draught of living death and they get the praise, you've lost. In this zero-sum worldview, cooperation is a liability. And yet, the tools for teamwork are there. The house values ambition, which can drive people to become great leaders. It values cunning, and which can be used to devise brilliant strategies. It values resourcefulness, which can inspire creative problem-solving in a group. But these values are corrupted by the absence of one crucial element: trust. Without trust, a team cannot function. Without mutual respect, strategy crumbles. Slytherin has ambition but no vision of shared success. This absence of teamwork also leaves Slytherins uniquely vulnerable. They rise quickly, but they fall alone. Regulus Black is a tragic example. His act of defiance against Voldemort is courageous, strategic, even noble, but it is also solitary. He tells no one, confides in no allies, and dies anonymously. He has all the makings of a hero, but lacks the support to survive. Had he trusted even one friend, the locket may have been destroyed years earlier. The house's social hierarchy doesn't encourage mentorship either. There's no evidence of older Slytherins guiding younger students the way Percy or Bill Weasley do in Gryffindor. Instead, power is hoarded at the top. This is not a community, it's a pyramid. And when the structure collapses, no one is there to catch the fall. Even the Death Eaters mirror this, a collection of Slytherin alumni bound not by trust, but by fear of Voldemort and ambition for their own power. The Sorting Hat foreshadows this weakness every time it sings of Slytherin's values without balance. In Order of the Phoenix, it warns, though condemned I am to split, due to Sorting Hat's decree, still I wonder if perhaps sorting may not bring disaster. The house system fosters division, but Slytherin's self-inflicted isolation deepens it. While other houses build community, Slytherins reinforce the walls between them. Even in fan interpretations and adaptations, the issue persists. Slytherin is often romanticized as misunderstood, a house of brilliant tacticians and misunderstood geniuses, but the canon doesn't support this. What we see instead is ambition without unity, talent without trust, strategy without structure. The problem isn't that Slytherins are incapable of teamwork, and it's that their values discourage it at every level. If Hogwarts ever wanted to rehabilitate Slytherin House, the answer would not lie in punishing them or diminishing their values. It would lie in reimagining what those values mean. Ambition can be shared, cunning can serve the greater good, resourcefulness can build communities, not just empires. But until Slytherin students are taught that power is strongest when shared, they will continue to rise as individuals and fall as a fractured house. Number 19, why doesn't Slytherin win the House Cup after Harry arrives? Before Harry Potter stepped foot into Hogwarts, the House of Slytherin stood as an unstoppable force. For 7 consecutive years they had claimed the House Cup with pride. Their dominance was unchallenged, their victory expected, their green and silver banners a familiar sight in the Great Hall's celebrations. It was almost a tradition, a certainty in the ever-changing magical world. But the moment Harry Potter entered the castle, everything changed, not gradually, not subtly, but with the force of a thunderclap. Slytherin, the reigning champion, would never again hold that cup in triumph. And the question that lingers in the minds of the observant is this: why? The narrative suggests it was a triumph of good over evil, of bravery over cunning. Gryffindor, the house of Harry Potter, and his noble friends quickly became the favoured son of Hogwarts. Daring, nerve, and chivalry were rewarded not just in spirit but in cold, hard points. And yet, when we take a step back and look at the mechanics, the actual scoring system and daily life at the school, a dissonance appears. For a place built on merit, why does one house begin to fail year after year, despite its consistent academic and Quidditch success? Consider the very first year. Slytherin was poised to win again. As the year drew to a close, their points towered over the others. The green banners were already hung. And then something peculiar happened. At the final feast, Dumbledore awarded last-minute points to Harry, Ron, Hermione and Neville, enough to edge Gryffindor into first place by a mere 10 points. Another 10 points to Neville Longbottom for being brave enough to stand up to his friends, Dumbledore announced. Applause rang out, the hall transformed, red and gold unfurled in celebration, and Slytherin, the rightful winner, was cast aside. This moment wasn't just a shift in mood, it was a signal. The headmaster had the power to shift the outcome with a few kind words and generous numbers. It wasn't illegal, but it broke the spirit of impartiality. Slytherin had earned those points all year long. They had fought hard in Quidditch. Their students, including Draco Malfoy and Marcus Flint, had achieved strong marks, but the rules were not applied equally. One single moment, and the entire year's efforts were invalidated. The tradition continued. In Harry's second year, the pattern repeated itself. The school was in chaos. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened. Fear hung in the air. And yet, despite everything, Slytherin remained competitive. Their Quidditch team was strong, even dominant. Draco, as Seeker, contributed to a robust win over Hufflepuff. Their grades remained high. And still, at the year's end, Gryffindor again walked away with the cup. There was no dramatic reversal this time, no feast announcement, but the result was the same. The House Cup had become a background detail, no longer a fair competition, but a symbolic crown handed to the protagonists. There is a sense that the Slytherins, regardless of their actual achievements, were not allowed to win. And it wasn't because they weren't performing, it was because they weren't the heroes. The story had decided who would be noble and who would be in the shadows. The winners had been cast before the game began. Even Snape, a Slytherin and head of house, was powerless to shift the outcome. His bias was called out. His punishments were questioned. But Dumbledore's own favoritism, cloaked in wisdom and warmth, went unchallenged. We must also examine the scoring system itself. House points were awarded arbitrarily. 100 points for discovering the truth behind the Philosopher's Stone, 10 points for answering a question correctly in class, subtracting 5 for being late. There was no rubric, no oversight. Teachers could give and take points at will, and no one seemed to question it. The final score each year rested not on fairness, but on narrative. The system was deeply flawed, and perhaps deliberately so. Take, for example, the events of the Triwizard Tournament in Year 4. Harry is forced into a deadly competition. The school descends into chaos. Cedric Diggory dies. And yet at the end there is no mention of the House Cup. Why? Because the story had become too serious. Slytherin's place no longer mattered. The House Cup only existed when it served the plot. It was a trophy for alignment, not accomplishment. It disappeared when it was inconvenient, and returned only to crown the favourites. Some might argue that Slytherin was filled with dark tendencies, that they didn't deserve to win because they fostered ambition at any cost. But that's not how Hogwarts was designed. Each house was meant to represent a valid path: bravery, intelligence, loyalty, and ambition. Slytherin's cunning wasn't a flaw, it was a trait, just as noble as courage. To penalize them for it is to say that ambition has no place in the magical world. And yet, many of the greatest wizards, including Merlin himself, came from Slytherin. Was he evil too? The punishment of Slytherin wasn't just limited to house points, it seeped into their treatment. Their house was portrayed as cold, unwelcoming, and cruel. They were cast as villains in every conflict. When students were petrified in the second year, suspicion fell on Slytherin first. When the school feared betrayal, they looked to Snape and Draco. Even when Snape risked his life, worked as a double agent, and ultimately died protecting Hogwarts, the story denied him full redemption. Slytherins were never allowed to be heroes. The bias became cultural. Students from other houses looked down on Slytherin. "There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin," Ron famously said, an outrageous claim that went unchallenged by anyone at the table. No one pointed out that Peter Pettigrew was a Gryffindor. No one recalled that Barty Crouch Jr. came from a respected family in another house. Slytherin became the scapegoat for evil, and that stigma affected their ability to be seen and judged fairly. Imagine instead if the points had been judged by an impartial panel. If every house had been measured by tangible results, academic grades, Quidditch wins, behavior records, Slytherin would have had a chance. But the reality of Hogwarts was a romantic one. The teachers played favorites, the students rooted for the protagonists. The scoreboard was just another prop in the great tale of Harry Potter. The House Cup was not a reward. It was a narrative tool. In Year 3, the injustice became even more glaring. The Time Turner incident, the Buckbeak drama, the serious black revelations, all centered around Gryffindors. And while their bravery was undeniable, the Slytherins again faded into the background. No dramatic contributions, no recognized successes, yet they continued to attend class, to win Quidditch games, to outperform others academically. But none of it mattered. The camera had moved on. The green banners had been retired. It's telling that even the teachers began to treat Slytherins differently. McGonagall fiercely protected her Gryffindors. Flitwick smiled kindly at Ravenclaws. Sprout nurtured her Hufflepuffs, but Snape, despite his favoritism, was seen as sinister for defending his house, his protection of Draco, his coldness to Harry, all framed as villainy, and when he gave or took points, his actions were scrutinized. The other heads were seen as just, Snape as biased. The scales were never even. Even in Year 5, during the chaos of Umbridge's reign, the story turned against Slytherin. Yes, some Slytherins supported her, but not all. Yet the entire house was portrayed as traitorous. When the DA was caught, it was a Slytherin who reported them. When Umbridge needed inquisitorial squad members, she chose Slytherins. But again, this wasn't the full picture. These decisions were framed as proof of moral failing, not as reactions to power and survival. The consequences of this bias echoed into the final battles. In the Battle of Hogwarts, Slytherins were the only house evacuated en masse. The others stayed to fight. It was painted as cowardice, but many Slytherins were children. Their parents were involved in the war. Asking them to fight would be asking them to stand against their families. And still, some Slytherins stayed. They fought. They defended the school, but their names were not sung. Their banners were not raised. Slytherin was systematically denied a fair narrative. And the House Cup was the earliest, most symbolic casualty of this injustice. It was a trophy that meant one thing to the students and something entirely different to the authors. To the world of Hogwarts, it was a symbol of excellence. But to the story of Harry Potter, it was just another device, a way to reward heroes and punish rivals. In a world where magic could solve anything, the truth remained untouchable. No Slytherin student, no matter how talented, could ever outshine the chosen one. Even Draco, with his superior flying skills, his cleverness, and his growth in later years, was trapped in a role he didn't choose. His failures were personal, his successes invisible, his achievements, from protecting his family to refusing to identify Harry in Malfoy Manor, were never praised. The same could be said of others in his house. The shadow was too thick to pierce. And so, year after year, the House Cup fell to Gryffindor. Not always through points, sometimes through narrative silence, sometimes because the score was never shared. But the result was the same. Slytherin, once the dominant house, became a footnote, a relic of the past. Their ambitions, their excellence, their cunning, all reduced to the trope of the villain. And the House Cup, meant to be a fair celebration of student success, became a symbol of storytelling convenience. This is not to say Gryffindor didn't earn their victories. They were brave, they were loyal. They faced death more times than most adults. But bravery is not the only virtue. And it is not the only one worth rewarding. Slytherin deserved more. Not just in house points, but in recognition, in fairness, in truth. The real question isn't why they lost, it's why they were never allowed to win again. And the answer, uncomfortable as it is, lies not in merit, but in the story that was chosen to be told. Number 20. Why are there no strong female leaders in Slytherin? In the dim green glow of the Slytherin common room, where ambition simmers beneath stone walls and the lake's light filters in like a secret, one question persists like a whispered spell no one wants to speak aloud. Where are the female leaders? The boys are everywhere. Draco Malfoy with his silver hair and sharp tongue, Crabbe and Goyle grunting behind him like shadows, and Theodore Nott, the silent watcher in the corners. These are the figures that dominate the halls when Slytherin is mentioned. And yet, among the whispers of cunning and the rustle of cloaks, the girls remain oddly silent. Their names rarely rise above a murmur, their presence barely felt in the narratives shaped by both the books and the films. Pansy Parkinson is perhaps the only Slytherin girl to be granted something resembling attention, but even she is cast more as a caricature than a character. She is described not with strength or brilliance, but with contempt, a pug-faced girl, giggling stupidly, clinging to Malfoy's arm. She is the loyal sycophant, the cruel cheerleader, the one who famously cried, "But he's there! Potter's there! Someone grab him!" A moment of cowardice rather than cunning. Her most defining trait is not leadership or strategy, but her obsession with Draco Malfoy, which reduces her to a sidekick in a story that doesn't belong to her. The absence becomes even more glaring when one considers how deeply Slytherin values ambition, leadership and power, traits that should manifest across gender. And yet, for all of its supposedly inclusive ambition, Slytherin becomes a stage where boys posture and girls vanish. While Ravenclaw has Cho Chang as Seeker and Padma Patil as a prefect, and Gryffindor boasts Hermione Granger, Ginny Weasley, and even Angelina Johnson as Quidditch captain, Slytherin's girls are trapped in the background, their potential left unexplored. It is a strange phenomenon given the house's legacy. Salazar Slytherin himself valued greatness above all. He would not have restricted power to boys alone. And yet, the modern-day version of his house appears to do exactly that. Leadership in Slytherin is embodied in Malfoy, even though his reign is built more on lineage and bluster than on true tactical brilliance. Still, his influence is uncontested, and no girl rises to rival him. Even in moments where a strong female Slytherin could have taken the reins, like during the Inquisitorial Squad, no girl steps forward to lead. Pansy is there, yes, but again, only as an accessory to Malfoy's ambition. She doesn't challenge him or propose strategy. She follows. Imagine how different it might have felt if the Inquisitorial Squad had a female commander, someone cold, calculating, and clever enough to outmaneuver the DA. Instead, the opportunity was given to Draco, and Pansy remained in the shadows, a wand pointed only where he pointed his. The movies exacerbate this silence. In the films, Pansy becomes a shrill stereotype, jealous of Hermione, fawning over Draco, never once portrayed as intelligent or strategic. The visual language of the film pushes her further into the background. She is not allowed a single scene of agency, while Luna Lovegood gets entire sequences of ethereal insight and Neville Longbottom gets a hero's arc. The Slytherin girls disappear altogether, as if the green of their robes swallows their stories whole. This becomes even more jarring when we remember how many Slytherin women must exist in the background, unnoticed. Daphne Greengrass and Millicent Bulstrode are canonically present, but they are ghosts in the narrative. Daphne, who would later marry Draco, never once speaks in the books. Millicent is reduced to a comic moment in the Polyjuice Potion disaster, her wand arm used as a punchline for Hermione's regret. Neither is given traits that align with their house's ideals. No clever schemes, no political insights, no cunning plans. They merely fill space. There is no reason inherent to Slytherin that would exclude girls from rising. Ambition knows no gender. Cunning is not reserved for the Y chromosome. And yet somehow the narrative has structured Slytherin as a space where girls do not climb, at least not publicly. The Gryffindor girls stand tall in duels and battles. The Ravenclaw girls solve riddles, and hold court in classrooms. Even Hufflepuff has Tonks, a fiercely independent aura who bends rules but not morals. But Slytherin girls, they're hidden in the tapestry, woven into corners with no light. It would have been compelling to meet a girl in Slytherin who rivaled Hermione not in morality but in mind, someone who viewed Hogwarts as a chessboard, each house a set of pieces, each alliance a move toward power, someone who manipulated her peers with charisma rather than brute force, who competed not for Dumbledore's favour but for her own ends. But that girl never appears. Not once in 7 books or 8 films, not in the corridors, not in the dueling club, not in the resistance, not in the aftermath. There was a place for her. In the war, when children chose sides and the school became a battlefield, there could have been a Slytherin girl who joined the Death Eaters not out of fear or blood loyalty, but because she believed in her own rise. Or perhaps a girl who secretly worked for the Order, proving that Slytherin's cunning could be turned to noble causes. But again, silence. No female Slytherin is ever shown to fight, to choose, to stand. Only the boys are given arcs. And what a loss that is, because within the ideology of Slytherin lies immense narrative potential for girls. A female Slytherin leader could have rewritten everything. She could have made readers question their assumptions. She could have redefined ambition as something graceful and deadly. She could have been complex, not cruel, sharp, not shallow. But instead she is never written. Some might argue that Bellatrix Lestrange is that woman. But Bellatrix is no schoolgirl. She's a villain of the adult world, deranged and extreme, not a student grappling with loyalty and self-definition. She offers no blueprint for what a young Slytherin girl might aspire to. Her power is unhinged, not aspirational, and crucially, she operates outside the walls of Hogwarts in a space that gives her power only because she is feared. She's not a leader, she's a weapon. By contrast, Hermione is not feared, she is respected. She earns her place through intellect, courage, and discipline. Ginny, too, earns hers through strength and determination. Luna is loved for her oddness, her clarity, her gentle heart. What female Slytherin is ever given space to be complex in the same way? There is none. Not one. And that's not just a flaw, it's a hole in the tapestry of Hogwarts, a flaw in its world-building. Even the Sorting Hat, in its cryptic way, hints at Slytherin's inclusivity of greatness. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. There's no mention of boys, no mention of gender, just ambition, just means, just greatness. The Hat never said it was a boys' club, and yet that is what the story delivers. The irony, of course, is that in a house that prizes manipulation, the girls could have been its finest players. Social strategy is often coded as feminine in literature, persuasion, influence, subtlety. A Slytherin girl with those skills could have been unstoppable, but Rowling's narrative never gives her the stage, not in the classroom, not in the common room, not in the war. There is one moment, a brief flicker, where the absence is felt most sharply. In the final battle, when McGonagall says, "Slytherin house will leave," there is no protest. No girl stands up to say, "Not all of us." No girl fights to stay, to prove that she is not defined by her house's past. All we are left with is an empty space, a missed chance, a silence where a voice could have been. Slytherin could have been a crucible, not just for Draco Malfoy's arrogance, but for a girl's rise through intellect and charm. There could have been a rival to Hermione who didn't need to be evil, just ambitious. Someone who walked a different path to power. Someone who challenged the idea that cunning must always look like cruelty. But that girl never arrived, and so the Slytherin girls remain nameless, faceless, their stories untold, their power unexplored. While the boys duel and dominate, the girls are relegated to the edges of the map, and the green banners of ambition flutter quietly, waiting for the wind of a story that never came. Number 21. Why doesn't Slytherin produce great good wizards? Of all the questions left unspoken in the halls of Hogwarts, few are as perplexing as the riddle of Slytherin's light. A house built upon ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness, traits that by no means denote evil, has for centuries been the cradle of darkness. The name Slytherin itself carries a whisper of suspicion, a slither of distrust. Yet what makes this truly baffling is not that dark wizards emerge from Slytherin, but that seemingly no good ones do. With all its promise and prestige, where are Slytherin's heroes? The Sorting Hat once described Slytherin as a place for those who will use any means to achieve their ends. But this, in itself, isn't evil. It's strategic. In a world ruled by bureaucracy, politics, and ancient magic, wouldn't you want the ambitious and goal-oriented to be shaping policy, fighting for justice, advancing magical science? And yet, when the dust of history settles, one can hardly name a Slytherin whose legacy isn't tainted by darkness, fear, or suspicion. Why is the brightest light never allowed to shine from the green and silver tower? Tom Riddle, of course, is the most infamous example. The boy who could have been a minister, a scholar, a reformer of the magical world, chose to fracture it instead. But even before Voldemort, Salazar Slytherin himself laid the foundation for exclusivity, mistrust, and eventual division. His insistence on blood purity created a fracture in the Hogwarts founders' friendship. He wasn't just cunning, he was rigid, and perhaps in this lies the first shadow. The original values of the house were not ambition in service of the world, but ambition in service of an ideal, and that ideal was exclusion. Throughout the centuries, Slytherin House produced countless students whose talents could have elevated the wizarding world. Yet time and again, those talents were used to entrench hierarchies, hoard power, or manipulate systems. Lucius Malfoy was not a fool. His intelligence, charisma, and connections made him a natural-born leader. But his leadership served only pure-blood supremacy and fear. He operated within the Ministry of Magic, but always for personal gain, not societal progress. He could have championed reforms, led global wizarding cooperation, or helped advance magical understanding. Instead, he clung to the rot of old ideologies. Even among Slytherins who seemed poised for greatness, the story spiraled inward. Regulus Black is often raised as a counterpoint, a boy who turned against Voldemort and died retrieving a Horcrux, but even Regulus did so in secrecy. He never stood publicly against darkness, never inspired others, never rewrote his story in daylight. His act was brave, but hidden. There was no triumph, only a lonely death in a dark cave. Is that the best Slytherin can offer in the way of redemption, a whispered sacrifice, unmarked and unremembered? Horace Slughorn may be the sole exception, but even his story is coated in moral ambiguity. Yes, he mentored talented students and avoided open alignment with Voldemort. But his greatest shame was the memory he erased the day he told a young Tom Riddle about Horcruxes. Slughorn never acted out of malice, but out of pride and self-preservation. His Slytherin instincts weren't used to change the world, they were used to stay out of trouble. Is survival the noblest ambition a Slytherin can muster? Compare this to the legacies left by the other houses. Gryffindor has Harry, Dumbledore, and the Marauders. Ravenclaw has Luna Lovegood and Phileas Flitwick, individuals who embraced eccentricity and knowledge with heart. Hufflepuff gave us Cedric Diggory, a fair and honourable soul. But Slytherin, its brightest graduates are either in Azkaban, in disgrace, or buried with no tombstone. Why does the house that produces the most resourceful minds never produce a champion of the light? And what of Merlin? Yes, canonically, he was a Slytherin. But the books never offer this as a point of pride. In fact, it's a background fact so muted it might as well be erased. No statue of Merlin stands in the Slytherin common room. No students shout, "I want to be like him," when they're sorted, The house doesn't celebrate his legacy, perhaps because even Merlin, in popular wizarding history, is seen through a lens of political manipulation and ambition. A wizard of great deeds, yes, but also one whose agenda was cloaked in mystery. There's also the question of the sorting hat's role in perpetuating this cycle. Every year it places children into houses not solely by who they are, but by what they value. A child who desires greatness above all else is placed in Slytherin, even if that greatness could be used for good. But in a house steeped in dark tradition, surrounded by older students who glorify Voldemort or Malfoy wealth, what chance does a young idealist have to remain uncorrupted? The culture of Slytherin seems self-fulfilling. It nurtures ambition but not ethics, excellence but not empathy. Draco Malfoy offers a tragic example of potential squandered. He was clever, charismatic and driven. In another house, with another circle of influence, he might have become a powerful ally for change, but instead he was handed a legacy of cruelty and elitism and followed it blindly. By the time he began to question his path, it was too late. His final years at Hogwarts were marked by fear and guilt. He didn't want to kill Dumbledore, he didn't want to be a Death Eater, but his ambition had led him into a trap, and he didn't know how to escape. Why don't more Slytherins rebel against this narrative? Why doesn't the house produce an outspoken reformer, a public defender, or a renowned healer? It is not a lack of intelligence or power. Slytherins are not inherently evil, but perhaps they are inherently isolated. The very traits that define them, cunning, self-preservation, strategic thinking, do not lend themselves to acts of selfless courage. In crisis, they survive. They wait, they plot, but they rarely rise. The Battle of Hogwarts should have been a chance for Slytherin to redeem itself, but instead we read, all the Slytherins had left the hall. That sentence, simple and crushing, sealed a perception that even in the face of death, Slytherin chose to run. Yes, some returned to fight, but none are named. No Slytherin is remembered for bravery that night. No monument lists them among the fallen heroes. The silence is deafening. Blaise Zabini once said, "Well, I wouldn't want to be in the same room as a werewolf." That was his reason for questioning Dumbledore's choice of Remus Lupin as a teacher. Again, fear disguised as judgment, self-interest disguised as principle, and again, potential wasted. Blaise was intelligent, well-connected, and talented. But like so many of his housemates, he saw the world as something to manage and manipulate, not change for the better. Even the post-war era does little to rehabilitate Slytherin's image. We never hear of a Slytherin heading the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. We don't read about a Slytherin aura taking down dark wizards. The silence stretches on. What makes this omission feel even stranger is that in the real world, ambition and cunning are often the traits that drive progress, yet in the world of Harry Potter, they remain a warning. One might argue that J.K. Rowling wrote Slytherin as a necessary foil, the house of shadows, of temptation, of morally grey decisions. But the lack of balance creates a myth that ambition and morality are incompatible, that to want power is to court darkness, that Slytherins can never be heroes. And that myth, repeated through generations, becomes prophecy. The sorting hat warns, "I'll take the lot and sort them out." But what if the system is broken? What if Slytherins are never given the space to shine? It is worth asking how different things could have been if Dumbledore had more openly embraced Slytherins, if he had chosen a head of house who modelled justice and kindness, if he had publicly recognised Regulus, if he had invited Slytherins into the Order of the Phoenix. Instead, the lines were drawn. Slytherin was Voldemort's breeding ground, and thus it was feared. And in being feared, it was neglected. In the end, the tragedy of Slytherin is not that it produces dark wizards. The tragedy is that it wastes so much potential. Its students arrive at Hogwarts full of dreams, energy, and fierce intelligence, but they are shaped by legacy, by pressure, by expectation, and so they bend, not all to evil, but few to greatness. And so the halls remained silent. The portraits of ambitious men and women line the dungeon walls, but none smile with pride at changing the world for the better. The green banners ripple, but never in triumph. And perhaps, somewhere deep beneath the lake, the House of Salazar waits for a student bold enough to reclaim its light, not with spells, but with a legacy worth remembering. Number 22. Why is Slytherin's common room so isolated? The Slytherin common room is a mystery wrapped in stone and secrets, buried beneath the black lake where the green water filters the light into something ghostly and distorted. While the Gryffindor Tower looks to the sky and Hufflepuff basks near the warmth of the kitchens, Slytherin's lair lurks below the surface in a dungeon that even the other houses rarely see. The entrance isn't marked. There is no painting to negotiate with, no barrel to knock on in a rhythm. Instead, it is a blank stretch of damp stone that parts only for those who belong, and even then, only when the correct password is given. It is not only hidden, it is deliberately concealed, intentionally unwelcoming. This level of secrecy might be romanticized by those who belong to the house, but for everyone else it breeds mistrust, fear, and sometimes hatred. It's a curious architectural and social decision. Ravenclaw's common room lies in a tower, with a riddle at the door that invites intellect. Hufflepuff's is behind barrels near the kitchens, earthy, inviting, and cheerful. Gryffindor guards its tower with a portrait who, for all her vigilance, is friendly and willing to listen. These spaces reflect values, wisdom, loyalty, bravery. But Slytherin's entrance tells a different story. It says, "You are not welcome here, turn away." Even the location, under the lake, implies a desire for separation. The water that presses down on the glass windows seems symbolic of the pressure to remain. Submerged, secretive, isolated. Why would Hogwarts, a school meant to foster unity through diversity, allow such a stark physical and social divide? In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the other common rooms are explored or at least described by Harry. He visits Gryffindor, learns about Ravenclaw, even gets into Hufflepuff's territory. But Slytherin remains completely unknown until Chamber of Secrets, and only then because Harry uses Polyjuice Potion to disguise himself as a Slytherin student. The need for deception, transformation, and infiltration, just to glimpse the inner world of Slytherin, shows how utterly the house is walled off, not just by stone, but by design and intent. The school's faculty, especially Dumbledore, must have been aware of the implications. The same headmaster who praised unity and kindness let 1/4 of the student body exist in virtual social quarantine. The only time Gryffindors and Slytherins interact meaningfully is in direct competition. Quidditch matches, house point rivalries, classroom duels. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry leads Dumbledore's army, not one Slytherin is even considered for inclusion. Why would they be? By the 5th year, they are no longer seen as fellow students, but as adversaries. The architecture and traditions of Hogwarts have reinforced that division since day one. The result is that Slytherins are rarely understood as individuals. The moment Draco Malfoy extends his hand in friendship to Harry during their first meeting, it is already coded as arrogance. His tone, his words, even his house affiliation mark him as a villain before he has a chance to be a boy. In the Philosopher's Stone, the Sorting Hat says that Slytherins are cunning folk who use any means to achieve their ends. That single line shapes how all other characters and the readers view the house. But ambition, like bravery or wisdom, is morally neutral. It only becomes threatening when coupled with secrecy and exclusion, and Slytherin's physical and cultural isolation makes ambition look like scheming, like plotting in the dark. The prejudice becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because Slytherin is so closed off, students from other houses project onto it every negative quality they can imagine. Slytherins, in turn, see this mistrust and double down on their pride and their walls. In The Half-Blood Prince, we see Draco isolate himself even from his friends, disappearing into the room of requirement with tasks he refuses to explain. His cloak and dagger behavior would be alarming from any student, but coming from a Slytherin, it is interpreted as almost expected. Even Snape, one of the few professors to come from Slytherin, operates in shadows, hiding his loyalties so deeply that not even Voldemort sees the truth. Other houses are not immune to bad behavior, but their missteps are framed as exceptions. When Peter Pettigrew betrays James and Lily, no one concludes that Gryffindors are untrustworthy. When Marietta Edgecombe exposes Dumbledore's army, no one casts suspicion on all Ravenclaws. But when Pansy Parkinson mocks Harry, or when Crabbe and Goyle serve as Draco's muscle, it's considered typical Slytherin cruelty. The isolation of the house ensures that its members are never judged as individuals. Their dungeon might as well be a prison. Even the few Slytherins who defy expectations, like Andromeda Tonks or Regulus Black, must leave the house behind to be recognized as good people. Andromeda is disowned by her family for marrying a Muggle-born. Regulus dies trying to bring down Voldemort, but is never remembered with the reverence given to Gryffindor heroes. His sacrifice is buried, both literally and metaphorically. Slytherins who turn away from the darkness are swallowed by the silence of their own house, while those who remain are assumed to embrace it. The physical layout of Hogwarts mirrors these divisions in disturbing ways. The castle is ancient, and its founders built it with their values carved into the stone. Godric Gryffindor wanted bravery and honor, and his tower soars above the school. Helga Hufflepuff prized loyalty and community, and her common room is open, bright, close to the hearth. Rowena Ravenclaw sought knowledge and understanding, so her house sits high, where one must answer a riddle to enter. But Salazar Slytherin? He distrusted Muggleborns, craved purity, and built his house beneath the lake, where the outside world couldn't reach him. It is no coincidence that the Chamber of Secrets was hidden in the same area. Both the Slytherin common room and the chamber are behind stone walls in the bowels of the school. Both are accessible only through secret knowledge. Both reflect an ethos of separation and superiority. When Slytherin's values are turned toxic, the line between ambition and elitism blurs. That line is already etched into the stone of the dungeons. It's not a far walk from the common room to the basilisk's lair, figuratively or literally. Even in the Deathly Hallows, when the school is under siege and the students must unite against Voldemort, Slytherin is excluded. When McGonagall offers all students the choice to leave, almost all of the Slytherins do. But who could blame them? For years they were treated as outsiders, accused of harboring dark thoughts and darker loyalties. When the war came, they were not invited to join the fight. They were told to prove they weren't the enemy. By then it was too late. Not all Slytherins are cowards or villains. Horace Slughorn is vain, yes, but he values talent over blood. He mentors Lily Evans. He adores Harry. Yet even he hides his past, his involvement with Tom Riddle, because he knows what others will assume. "I taught the whole lot, you know," he tells Harry in Half-Blood Prince. "Every one of the Death Eaters was in my house." That shame is inherited, and it never leaves. Slytherins are expected to either embrace the darkness or live forever in suspicion. Would things have been different if Slytherin's common room had a portrait instead of a blank stone wall? If its door opened into a public hallway where others could pass by, maybe even visit? If Slytherin students were seen laughing with others in shared spaces rather than gliding off into the depths like shadows? Openness breeds empathy, mystery breeds myth, and Slytherin has been mythologized into a villainous collective because no one is ever allowed to see its human side. There's something tragic in the design. Children are sorted at 11, too young to understand identity, too vulnerable to resist peer pressure. A child placed in Slytherin may find the common room thrilling at first, like a secret club, but as years pass and the friendships narrow and the other houses drift further away, that initial pride curdles into bitterness. The dungeon becomes a hiding place, the green water outside the windows becomes a barrier, and the students grow up learning that they are not trusted. So they learn not to trust. We see glimpses of what could have been. In The Cursed Child, Scorpius Malfoy, Slytherin and son of a Death Eater, is the kindest character in the entire play. Loyal, gentle, brilliant. His friendship with Albus Potter is genuine, and when they walk through Hogwarts, they challenge the story that only Gryffindors can be heroes. But the books never gave us that version. They left Slytherin trapped beneath the lake, behind a wall, behind a password. Slytherin doesn't have to be this way. Ambition can be noble. Cunning can be clever. Resourcefulness can be heroic. But when you build a house to be invisible, you teach its members that being seen is dangerous. When you hide a community, you breed suspicion. Hogwarts failed Slytherin not by housing it in the dungeons, but by refusing to lift the stones and let the light in. And in that darkness, 1,000 assumptions grew. It's a shame the Sorting Hat never got the chance to revise its song. Perhaps one year it would have sung not of traits, but of empathy. Perhaps it would have told the students, "Open your doors and others will open theirs. Live in the light and others will see you." But as long as Slytherin's entrance remains sealed in shadow, so too will its heart. Number 23. Why isn't empathy taught in Slytherin? Of all the peculiarities at Hogwarts, few are as unsettling as the moral vacuum surrounding Slytherin House. It is not merely that its students are ambitious or cunning, traits that can exist alongside compassion, but rather that they seem to operate in an environment where empathy is neither taught nor expected. The consequences of this absence are visible throughout the series in scenes that disturb more than they entertain. One need only remember Draco Malfoy's gleeful cruelty, Pansy Parkinson's mocking of Hermione, or the way the entire house appeared to cheer when Harry was injured. These are not harmless pranks, but the actions of children being shaped into adults without a moral compass, and the question that rises again and again is, why does no one teach them empathy? In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Neville Longbottom is hexed, humiliated and treated as if his value is somehow lower than that of other students. While students from other houses occasionally tease or mock, it is the Slytherins who weaponize cruelty. When Draco Malfoy throws around insults like fatty or crybaby, there is no intervention, not from Professor Snape, not from Dumbledore, not from any moral authority. Instead, the school shrugs as though such behavior is an inevitable trait of Slytherin House. But since when is a lack of empathy a feature, not a bug, in a system of education? One of the most jarring examples of this moral void appears in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. After Hermione Granger is petrified, the Slytherins are not horrified. They do not appear frightened for their fellow student. Pansy Parkinson mocks her absence. Draco Malfoy, with his usual venom, expresses more interest in who might be next than in the well-being of those already attacked. "I hope it's Granger next," he says. This is not just an individual flaw, it is cultural, it is house-wide, and that makes it institutional. Which professor ever corrected this? Which head of house paused to ask, what are we teaching them about the value of human life? It becomes particularly grotesque in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. When Harry is nearly killed by a dragon, the reaction in the Slytherin common room is not worry or concern, but delight. "Did you see Potter's face? Priceless," Blaise Zabini reportedly says, laughing with the others. That a 14-year-old nearly died in front of the school appears to be less interesting to them than the opportunity to indulge in mockery. Again, not one professor steps in to address the deeper issue. No one asks the Slytherins, "Why are you laughing at pain?" This pattern continues, perhaps most cruelly, in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when Katie Bell is cursed by a dark object. As the school reels in panic, the Slytherins distance themselves emotionally. Their focus is not on Katie's suffering, but on how it affects Quidditch matches and school reputation. Even then, no lesson is taught about the power of compassion, No group discussion is held. The professors whisper in offices, but they do not teach. They theorize, but they do not intervene. Meanwhile, children grow colder by the year. Horace Slughorn, who leads Slytherin House during Harry's 6th year, might seem an improvement over Snape in warmth and civility. But even Slughorn's favoritism reinforces division rather than empathy. He cultivates elite students for his Slug Club, based on pedigree, power, or promise. Morality is not a factor. Character is not a requirement. Crabbe and Goyle are ignored, not because they're cruel, but because they're not useful. Hermione is only invited because of her academic genius. Slughorn sees children as social investments. He does not see heart. And then, of course, there is Severus Snape, a brilliant man, a tragic figure, a war hero, but also a teacher who never once calls out the abuse his students inflict on others. In fact, he encourages it. When Draco calls Hermione a filthy little mudblood in Chamber of Secrets, Snape does not punish him. He doesn't even scold him. He coldly tells Hermione that it's not a nice word, but fails to address the hate beneath it. He does not teach why it is wrong. He does not sit the class down and say, "This kind of speech leads to bloodshed." And if a teacher will not correct a slur, what hope is there for deeper lessons? The lack of empathy taught in Slytherin becomes especially alarming when one considers its alignment with Voldemort's ideology. Tom Riddle, the Slytherin star who became Lord Voldemort, was not simply brilliant. He was emotionally hollow. He used people, discarded them, punished kindness as weakness, and the house that bore him never seems to develop an immune system to his legacy. On the contrary, students idolize him. They wear his arrogance like a badge. And still the staff says nothing. There are no special lessons in empathy, no healing programs, no attempts to break the cycle. When Dumbledore addresses the students at the end of Sorcerer's Stone, he awards points for bravery and friendship, but he does not say a word about compassion. He does not speak of unity. He does not address the gaping divide between houses. He could have used that moment as headmaster to teach empathy. Instead, he uses it to reward competition. And so the Slytherins once again learn that feelings are irrelevant unless they lead to power. The systemic failure becomes painfully evident during Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. In the Battle of Hogwarts, the Slytherins are asked to leave the school. It is presented as a practical decision, but its symbolism is devastating. Slytherin House is not trusted to fight for good. It is not even given the chance. Instead of trying to inspire their courage or appeal to their hearts, the professors decide they're a liability. And who can blame them? After years of neglecting their emotional education, what other result could they expect? This exclusion is not just a consequence, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The school expected Slytherins to be cold, so it never taught them warmth. It assumed they'd be cruel, so it never showed them kindness. And in doing so, it created the very monsters it feared. Not every Slytherin becomes evil, of course, but even the decent ones, like Regulus Black or Narcissa Malfoy, only discover their moral conscience through trauma, not teaching. They are not guided toward empathy. They are pushed into it by loss. One wonders how different the story might have been if someone had tried, if Snape had made it his mission to teach the value of other people's feelings, if Dumbledore had created a Hogwarts-wide curriculum that included not just defense against the dark arts, but defense of the human heart, if there were mandatory lessons on Muggle rights, the horrors of prejudice, and the healing power of listening. Perhaps Draco would have grown into something other than a coward. Perhaps Crabbe wouldn't have died in a fire he started himself. Even more heartbreakingly, perhaps Tom Riddle would not have become Voldemort. We know from Half-Blood Prince that he showed signs of cruelty early, but also that he was abandoned, unloved, and afraid. What if his first interactions with Hogwarts had included therapy, mentorship, and emotional education? What if he had been shown that power was not the only way to matter? Instead, he found in Slytherin a place where ambition was everything, where control was celebrated, and where empathy was optional. The failure to teach compassion in Slytherin is not just a narrative oversight. It is a metaphor for all systems that prioritize results over relationships. It asks a chilling question: what happens when we raise children to be clever but not kind, when we encourage them to win but not to care? Hogwarts, for all its magic, failed Slytherin House, and in doing so it failed everyone. There is also the matter of cultural stereotyping. Other houses are allowed complexity. Gryffindors can be reckless or humble. Ravenclaws can be genius or awkward. Hufflepuffs can be loyal or lazy. But Slytherins are rarely allowed nuance. They are framed as manipulators, bullies, or at best, survivors. This limits their ability to evolve, and it limits the story's ability to show what redemption could look like, not just for individuals, but for cultures. When Harry names his son Albus Severus Potter, he says, "You were named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was the bravest man I ever knew." It is a beautiful moment, but it is also too little, too late. Snape's bravery was real, but his failure to protect children from cruelty was also real. To praise him without acknowledging that harm is to romanticize suffering, and it sends a mixed message. Slytherins can be redeemed, but only in death. Imagine a different world where Slytherins are taught to value feelings alongside cunning, where strategy includes kindness and ambition is measured not just by success, but by the goodness of the path chosen. Imagine a Hogwarts where empathy is not house-specific, but universal, where professors model not just power, but humility, where the pain of others is not a punchline. The books offer no such vision, the films even less. And perhaps that is the greatest tragedy of all, because children read these stories. They see that Slytherins are mocked and feared, but rarely transformed. They learn that some people are just bad, and that teaching them to feel is either impossible or unimportant. This is not just lazy writing, it is dangerous storytelling. There is hope, though, in characters like Draco Malfoy, who, despite his upbringing, hesitates to kill. In Narcissa, who lies to protect a child not her own. In Regulus Black, who dies trying to destroy the very evil he once served. These moments hint at what could have been, at what should have been taught, at what still could be taught if Hogwarts ever chose to believe that the heart matters just as much as the wand. Number 24. Why is a snake the house symbol? In the quiet echo of the Hogwarts dungeons, where green-tinted light plays across the stone walls and the Black Lake sighs just beyond, the symbol of the serpent coils eternally above the common room fireplace. The snake, elegant and silent, watches over generations of Slytherin students with its cold, unblinking gaze. Yet for all its visual strength, this choice of creature raises a fundamental question that has lingered since the founding of the school. Why did Salazar Slytherin, of all the animals in the magical world, choose a snake? A creature that, even in wizarding culture, is associated with suspicion, treachery, and darkness? It is no secret that Slytherin House is often portrayed with an ominous air. While Gryffindor roars with the lion's courage, Ravenclaw soars with the eagle's wisdom, and Hufflepuff roots itself in the stability of the badger, Slytherin slithers with the snake's cunning. But unlike the other animals, which evoke a universal admiration across both Muggle and magical traditions, the snake carries with it millennia of cultural baggage. From the Garden of Eden in Christian theology to basilisks in medieval folklore, the snake has been a creature of warning. There's not a witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin, Ron Weasley says in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, echoing the suspicion bred into the house from its own animal. The associations are not accidental. Salazar Slytherin himself was a Parselmouth, one of the rare wizards who could speak to snakes. This ability, while impressive, became the hallmark of dark wizards, most notably Lord Voldemort, who inherited it through the Slytherin bloodline. The ability to communicate with snakes did not grant understanding or compassion, but control. It allowed for domination over beasts that others feared, reinforcing the idea that Slytherins seek to master rather than coexist. Yet one must ask, was the snake chosen as a reflection of Slytherin's affinity for Parseltongue, or was the symbolism already steeped in his identity, inseparable from the traits he cherished? Slytherin valued ambition, resourcefulness, and cunning, qualities that snakes might metaphorically represent. A snake waits, strikes with precision, and survives through stealth rather than brute force. But even this rationale raises uncomfortable implications. If Slytherin believed his values noble, if he truly thought himself and his descendants as leaders rather than villains, why tie his house so tightly to an animal long shunned and reviled? In choosing a snake, he shaped how generations would perceive his legacy. Could he have instead chosen the fox, the panther, or even the hawk? Animals also associated with intelligence and strategy, but without the overwhelming aura of malevolence? The answer may lie not in what the snake is, but in what it is meant to challenge. By choosing the snake, Slytherin perhaps made a deliberate statement that greatness lies in embracing the misunderstood. That power comes from claiming symbols others fear. This interpretation gives his decision a rebellious nobility, an effort to redefine cultural norms rather than succumb to them. But such reinterpretation demands active effort from the rest of the wizarding world, and history shows they were unwilling to offer it. Instead, they entrenched the stereotype. Slytherins became the house of the snake, not of ambition, not of greatness, but of danger. The wizarding world did not try to rehabilitate the snake's image. It leaned into the dark reputation. The very emblem of the dark mark, conjured by Voldemort to mark his Death Eaters, features a skull with a snake pouring from its mouth. The basilisk, hidden for centuries beneath Hogwarts, was the ultimate snake, a murderous monster bred from ancient magic and hate. Even Harry Potter, when first discovering his ability to speak Parseltongue, recoiled from it instinctively. "You were there, you heard me," he says, in Chamber of Secrets, disturbed by the power that linked him to Voldemort through a shared tongue. What Slytherin saw as a symbol of control and uniqueness became, in practice, a brand of suspicion and exclusion. Even the Sorting Hat, when first considering Harry's placement, whispered that Slytherin would help him on the way to greatness, but Harry's immediate reaction was one of revulsion. "Not Slytherin," he said, "not Slytherin," and the hat complied. The very idea of being associated with the snake was enough to trigger rejection. That moment cemented the perception. Slytherin equaled something unclean. Other houses did not suffer from such duality. Ravenclaw's eagle, though fierce, symbolized clarity and elevation of thought. Hufflepuff's badger, though humble, represented loyalty and perseverance. Gryffindor's lion, the king of beasts, needed no rebranding. But the snake demanded the world rewire millennia of myth, and failed. Instead of transforming the snake's reputation, the symbol reinforced it. When Slytherins like Draco Malfoy strutted through the castle with arrogance, sneered at Muggleborns and laughed at cruelty, the snake around their neck became a confirmation of the stereotype, not a challenge to it. One must also consider the effect on the students themselves. A child sorted into Slytherin carries the stigma not only of being ambitious or cunning, but of being dangerous. They enter a legacy where they are expected to be cold, possibly cruel, and perhaps destined for the wrong side of history. This is no fault of the individual, but of the emblem that has marked them. The snake creates self-fulfilling prophecies. When society treats you as suspect, you may begin to act accordingly. It is not a matter of evil, it is a matter of expectation. Even Severus Snape, one of the most complex characters in the series, remains bound to the contradictions of Slytherin. A man capable of deep love, but also bitterness and cruelty, he lived under the shadow of the snake. He was both protector and tormentor, spy and loyalist. His every action straddled the line between nobility and darkness. The snake on his robes was a mark of ambiguity, not identity. In Deathly Hallows, Dumbledore tells Harry that you must be the one to kill him, Harry, referring to Voldemort. But it is Snape's Slytherin cunning that places the final pieces on the chessboard to make that possible. The snake bites both ways. Had the symbol been different, had Slytherin been represented by a creature less drenched in fear, would the house have become what it did? Would Tom Riddle have found the same justification for his ideology if his house had not so thoroughly aligned with dominance, secrecy, and control? Would the magical world have given its children more room to be complex, to grow, to surprise, if the serpent had not whispered its legacy into their ears? These questions are not rhetorical. They shape how institutions reinforce identity through imagery. Even within magical creatures, the snake remains unique in its portrayal. Dragons, for instance, though deadly, are seen as majestic. Phoenixes are rare and powerful, but symbols of rebirth. Thestrals are associated with death, yet offer grace and understanding. But the snake remains isolated in menace. Its elegance is rarely seen as beauty. Its silence is interpreted as threat. In this context, Slytherin's choice becomes even more curious. It was not merely an unpopular animal, it was a symbol with few redeeming narratives. Perhaps the most tragic irony is that Slytherin House is not inherently evil. It has produced wizards of immense talent, courage, and loyalty. And yet the serpent coils tighter with every generation. It wraps itself around the story of the school, not as a guardian, but as a warning. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore says, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." But symbols have power. They shape choices, or at least the stories people tell about them. If the world sees you as a snake, it is harder to believe you can be the hero. The Sorting Hat's original song calls Slytherins power-hungry, but also praises their resourcefulness and fraternity. These are not evil traits, but in coupling them with the snake, the founders may have doomed these qualities to suspicion. Children seeking greatness are taught that their house is synonymous with secrecy. That ambition is dangerous, that friendship is transactional, not because of who they are, but because of the animals stitched onto their robes. And so the serpent remains. It glides across the stone in silence. It adorns the banners in green and silver. It slinks in the shadows of memory. There were other choices, but this was the one made. Perhaps Slytherin himself believed that those destined for greatness would survive the weight of the snake, that they would take the symbol and change it, that they would force the world to reconsider. But history is not always kind to such challenges. The snake still hisses, and too many still flinch. If there is to be redemption for Slytherin House, it will not come through heroics alone. It will come through the difficult work of reimagining what the serpent can mean. Not control, not fear, but patience, transformation, and resilience. A snake sheds its skin. Perhaps that is the metaphor we missed. But until that message reaches every student sorted under the green banners, the symbol will remain a paradox, elegant, ancient, powerful, and forever misunderstood. Number 25. Why don't Slytherin students ever change or evolve? In the vast castle of Hogwarts, where staircases moved and portraits spoke, something else remained painfully still. Not a hallway, not a spell, not a magical artifact, but the students of one particular house. While Gryffindors triumphed and fell, while Hufflepuffs quietly proved their worth, and while Ravenclaws unravelled mysteries of the mind, the students of Slytherin stood nearly frozen in their archetypes. Year after year, face after face, the traits never shifted. Ambition remained ambition, cruelty remained cruelty, and superiority remained superiority. The magical world changed. Slytherin did not. Draco Malfoy, the Prince of Slytherin, had the most potential for change. With his silvery hair, sneer sharpened by years of privilege, and a wand never far from his hand, He was everything Hogwarts taught its students to distrust. Yet even he was allowed only a flicker of doubt before being swept back into the safety of inherited arrogance. In the 6th book, when Draco is tasked with killing Dumbledore, there is a trembling moment of hesitation, a crack in his armor. "I have to do this," he mutters, with tears in his eyes. But the transformation never truly happens. By the final battle, he isn't a hero, not even a tragic anti-hero. He's simply absent, still Slytherin, still unchanged. Compare this to Neville Longbottom, a boy once so cowardly he couldn't stand without stammering. He too came from a legacy of auras, of war, of pain, but his path led to courage, sacrifice, leadership. In Deathly Hallows, he kills Nagini, one of the final acts of the war. Then Neville took his sword and cut off the snake's head. His journey had a full arc. He began as background and ended as legend. Draco had the same opportunity. The books simply didn't take it. And what of Crabbe and Goyle, the silent shadows who followed Draco like bewitched statues? There was a moment, a real compelling moment, when one of them turned rogue. In the Room of Requirement, Crabbe conjures fiend fire, a magical fire so wild and dangerous even seasoned wizards fear it. It's reckless, it's destructive, it's a sign that something inside Crabbe had boiled over. But what was it? Fear? Ambition? Rebellion? The story doesn't explore it. He dies, burned by his own spell, leaving no legacy behind but ashes and an unspoken warning. The moment flickers and dies like the fire itself. No growth, no reckoning, just a cautionary tale for those who didn't follow the hero's script. Pansy Parkinson, too, remains suspended in caricature. Her disdain for Harry is unyielding, her loyalty to Draco unquestioned, and her lack of complexity disappointing. Even during the climax of the series, when Hogwarts prepares for war, Pansy offers no surprising act of bravery or betrayal. She merely cries out, "But he's there! Potter's there! Someone grab him!" A line soaked in cowardice. Her role ends not in redemption, not in destruction, but in the absence of development, a placeholder in a story that offered transformation to nearly everyone else. Blaise Zabini is barely a sketch, but even his lines are drawn in cold ink. Handsome, aloof, disdainful of blood traitors, he represents the polished, self-satisfied version of Slytherin exclusivity. He offers commentary but never conflict, presence but never purpose. When the story could have used him to show the quiet unraveling of Slytherin ideology, the doubt behind the mask, he merely observes and retreats. "I wouldn't touch a blood traitor like her, whatever she looked like," he says in Half-Blood Prince, cementing his place in the parade of unchanging identities. It is this stillness, this unwillingness of the narrative to allow Slytherins to evolve, that renders them almost unreal. Hogwarts is a school. Schools are for growth, for trial and error, for transformation. Yet Slytherin is a hall of mirrors, where the same faces reflect the same ambition, cruelty, and elitism, generation after generation. Even Severus Snape, the house's most complex figure, undergoes a journey that is less about change and more about the unveiling of hidden motives. He does not evolve. We merely learn more about what was always there. The Sorting Hat, that ancient arbiter of fate, once warned the students of Hogwarts that the school was in danger of tearing apart. Oh, know the perils, read the signs, the warning history shows, for our Hogwarts is in danger from external deadly foes. Yet the real danger may have come from within, from a house system that locked children into roles before they even had a chance to become who they truly were. Slytherin, more than any other house, became a prison of identity, a prophecy fulfilled not by stars but by teachers, traditions and tropes. Even the teachers reflect this static nature. Horace Slughorn, charming and self-serving, never learns to look past status. He hoards talented students like gems, placing value not on kindness or character, but on fame and bloodlines. "You must have been born in the wrong house," he says to Harry, highlighting the twisted notion that a Slytherin could only be recognized for ambition, never for virtue. Slughorn redeems himself only slightly by offering a memory crucial to defeating Voldemort. But the act is reluctant, born not of moral clarity, but of guilt and fear. The house itself is cast in shadows, located beneath the lake, its common room described as a low-ceilinged dungeon, a space of murky water and green light, a room where change seems physically impossible. Compare this to Gryffindor Tower, perched high above, full of windows and light. Physical space in literature matters. It mirrors internal space. While other houses soar, Slytherin sinks, while others open, Slytherin seals. The environment itself conspires against transformation. The war ends and Slytherin is still Slytherin. When Harry meets his son Albus on platform 9 3/4, there's a flicker of fear that the boy might be sorted into Slytherin. If it matters to you, you can choose Gryffindor. Even in peace, even with Voldemort gone, the name of Slytherin carries a scar. The books never allow the house to wash it clean. There is no Slytherin student who becomes a beacon of post-war hope, no statue erected in their honor, no headline that reads, "Slytherin hero saves the day." The absence of change is not a coincidence. It is a literary choice, one that casts Slytherin not as a house of real people, but as a mythic caution. It's easier to draw lines when one group never crosses them. Good versus evil, courage versus cowardice, light versus dark. And yet Rowling complicates other characters with finesse. Percy Weasley's betrayal, Dumbledore's secrets, Ron's jealousy. Even Kreacher the house elf receives a redemption arc. But Slytherin, the very house meant to hold ambition and cunning, is denied the cunning of emotional evolution. What message does that leave for readers sorted into Slytherin by Pottermore's quiz? What lesson do children draw when they see their house represented only by villains, shadows, and the unchanging elite? The books whisper, sometimes scream, that people can change unless they wear green and silver. It is a strange and unfair contradiction, one that lingers like a spell gone wrong. And the irony is bitter, for it is Slytherin that boasts the potential for greatness, not just power. The house values ambition, a quality that, when paired with humility, can change the world. And yet that potential is consistently tethered to arrogance, to purity, to tradition. Slytherins are born with the seeds of transformation, but the soil of the narrative refuses to nurture them. Even Tom Riddle, the most infamous Slytherin of all, had a backstory rich with tragedy and possibility. His origins were horrific, orphaned, abandoned, abused. He could have become a figure like Harry, shaped by pain but softened by love. But the story charted only his descent. The child who asked about Horcruxes at age 16 was already written as doomed. No moment of temptation, no teacher who tried to see the wounded boy beneath the darkness, just prophecy and inevitability. There's a haunting symmetry in the way the series ends and begins with this unchanging house. From the first moment Draco offers Harry friendship and is rebuffed, the fates are sealed. You'll soon find out that some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. The bias is immediate, and it never lifts. When the dust settles, the survivors rebuild Hogwarts. But no voice speaks of reforming the house system. No headmaster suggests integrating students differently. The architecture of judgment remains. The tragedy of Slytherin is not that it produced dark wizards. Every house had its shadows. The tragedy is that its students were given so few chances to be anything else, not by their peers, not by their teachers, not by the narrative itself. They were offered one role, and they played it. And so in a world where magic bends the laws of physics, where death can be reversed and time itself can be travelled, one thing remains stubbornly immovable: the hearts and minds of the Slytherins, not because they lack the will, but because the story lacks the will to let them grow. In the echoes of Hogwarts' hallowed halls, you can still hear the steps of children who were never allowed to evolve. They whisper from beneath the lake through green-lit dungeons and unspoken regrets. They are the ghosts of what could have been, of change that never came. Number 27. Why does Slytherin teach domination instead of leadership? In the shadowed dungeons of Hogwarts, beneath the stone-cold floor of a castle that stood as a beacon of magical learning, the House of Slytherin coiled like a serpent in wait. A house whispered about in corridors and feared even by its own students who knew that ambition had a price. It was here that the cunning were groomed, where legacy reigned supreme, and where children learned early that success did not depend on fairness, but rather on clever maneuvering, dominance, and power. What they never learned, however, was how to lead, not truly, not with compassion, justice, or humility. In Slytherin, you learned to control, not to guide, to win, not to serve, and the consequences of this were never fully addressed, not even by the teachers who bore the weight of generations of misguided ambition. Draco Malfoy stood as the most glaring example. Raised in the luxurious chains of pure blood supremacy, handed privilege like candy at a death day party, and taught to sneer rather than understand. From the moment he set foot on the Hogwarts Express, Draco knew he was better, or rather, had been told so. "My father will hear about this," became his mantra, a threat wielded like a wand. But where was the professor? It's Snape or any other. He's who pulled Draco aside and told him that true leadership was not built on fear, that people followed loyalty, not lineage. Instead, Slytherin encouraged him, moulded him, cheered his clever cruelty, and sharpened his disdain. It made him believe that leading meant commanding, and commanding meant breaking others beneath your heel. In contrast, Harry Potter, born of Gryffindor fire, led even when he didn't want to. He had no thirst for power. He turned down it all, the Elder Wand, the ministry, the fame. And yet, people followed him because he stood for something. Neville Longbottom led the underground resistance in his 7th year, not through force, but through quiet bravery. Luna Lovegood inspired with truth and kindness, her ideas strange yet pure. Even Cedric. Diggory from Hufflepuff united his school in the Triwizard Tournament, not by manipulation, but by integrity. But who did Slytherin ever produce that led not through fear, but through wisdom? Even Tom Riddle, once the golden boy of Slytherin, slithered through shadows, building armies not of loyal friends, but of terrified subordinates. The professors knew, they saw it. Severus Snape, head of Slytherin for over a decade, had the perfect opportunity to correct this, yet he never did. He favored Malfoy, ignored his bullying, and punished others who dared oppose him. He modeled leadership not as mentorship, but as superiority. He never guided his students toward responsibility, never spoke of using power for good. When he was asked by Dumbledore to protect Hogwarts, he did it in silence, in shadows, always acting, always concealing. Even when he performed acts of bravery, he never taught bravery. His house remained in darkness. No speeches, no lessons on character or restraint, only silence, secrecy, and schemes. If Gryffindor taught you to lead from the front, Slytherin taught you to pull strings from the back. And perhaps that was Salazar Slytherin's original sin, believing that greatness came from blood rather than deeds. The house was built on exclusion, and that value was never updated, never reformed. It remained a club, not a family. When ambition becomes a game of thrones without rules, it festers. Students like Blaise Zabini, who openly judged others for their lack of pedigree, were never corrected. Pansy Parkinson, who mocked and jeered those weaker than her, was never asked to reflect. Their leadership was performative, hierarchical, cruel. In Slytherin, leadership was not earned. It was inherited or seized. Even in the most crucial moments when Hogwarts faced war, Slytherin was absent. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, When McGonagall gave the students a choice to stay and fight or leave, the Slytherins were escorted out. Not a single Slytherin stayed of their own accord, at least none were named in the text. Were they all cowards? Or had no one taught them that true leaders sometimes stay behind, not to win but to protect? Leadership, as it turns out, was never part of their curriculum. They had ambition without conscience, drive without empathy. Why did no one fix this? Why did the founders, or the professors who came after, allow Slytherin to rot in this philosophy of manipulation and dominance? Hogwarts moulded young minds. It claimed to value fairness and growth, and yet 1/4 of its students were pushed through a funnel that prioritized ambition over ethics, legacy over merit, and cunning over character. No mentorship programs, no ethical debates, no effort to reframe ambition as service. The house had prefects, yes, but they ruled like nobles over lesser peers, enforcing order, not nurturing growth. Horace Slughorn, though far more genial than Snape, also failed in this regard. He sought out promising students, but the chosen ones of his private club, not to mentor them toward goodness, but to bask in their glow, to ride their fame. He collected them like trophies. His slug club was not a school of ethics, but of networking. And while he showed kindness, he never challenged the foundations of Slytherin's toxic hierarchy. Even in his finest moment in returning to fight in the Battle of Hogwarts, his action was a rare exception, not a lesson taught to others. The house remained untouched, unexamined. Slytherin's reputation became a self-fulfilling prophecy. It attracted those who believed power mattered more than people. And no one corrected them. No one took the time to say, there's more to leadership than winning. Leadership is sacrifice, it's patience, it's accepting criticism, being transparent, lifting others instead of standing on them. But when did a Slytherin student ever hear that? Even the Sorting Hat, that ancient arbiter of placement, defined Slytherin as a place where those of great ambition dwell. Not wisdom, not justice, just ambition. It was a house of fire with no hearth to warm others. One might argue that ambition and leadership can coexist. That Salazar Slytherin's vision was simply misunderstood. But a vision unchallenged is a vision preserved, and Slytherin House never evolved. It never invited scrutiny. It never reflected. When Hermione Granger formed SPEW advocating for the rights of house elves, Slytherin laughed. When Harry defended Hagrid, they mocked. When Dumbledore spoke of unity, they rolled their eyes. These were not outliers. This was a culture, and cultures are shaped by teachers, by rituals, by reinforcement. Slytherin rewarded results, never the method. And when methods matter less than outcomes, ethics die quietly in a corner. Leadership is also about responsibility. A Gryffindor leader, reckless though they may be, takes blame. Harry, in Order of the Phoenix, blamed himself for Sirius's death, even when it wasn't entirely fair. A Slytherin leader, on the other hand, deflects. Tom Riddle blamed Muggle cruelty. Draco blamed Dumbledore. The house taught them well, to find fault outside, not within. They learned to hide behind excuses, and no professor ever made them stop and ask, "But what part did you play?" Instead, they were protected, coddled, or worse, admired for their ruthlessness. There was never a Slytherin equivalent of Dumbledore's army. Not because the students lacked magic or talent, but because they lacked a reason. No one had told them that leading meant giving others a voice, that collaboration beats conquest, that strategy without values is just war by another name. Had even one Slytherin professor assigned a book, like Great Wizarding Leaders and Their Sacrifices, or led a class on magical ethics, things might have been different. But they never did, not even once. They trained generals, not guardians. Consider Regulus Black, a Slytherin who died young, having discovered the horror of Voldemort's true aims. He tried, in the end, to do what was right, but he did it alone, in secret, without allies, because Slytherin does not teach community. It teaches secrecy, compartmentalization, solitude. Had someone taught Regulus that leadership means transparency, he might have lived. He might have led others to resist, but he died in silence, a would-be hero no one saw. Even the ministry, rife with corruption, mirrored Slytherin values. Positions were bought with influence, decisions made with image in mind. Dolores Umbridge, another Slytherin, ruled by fear, not inspiration. She built an empire of lies and called it order. And her education, her worldview, was not an accident. It was a product of a system that had trained her to value compliance over conscience. And she never questioned it, because Slytherin never taught her how. Every generation of Slytherins produced powerhouses, but few of them were leaders. They were CEOs, politicians, influencers, but not role models. They lacked the humility of Cedric, the endurance of Neville, the integrity of Hermione. They had charisma, yes, but charisma without compassion is manipulation. And Slytherin, for centuries, trained manipulators. How many more Regulus Blacks must be lost? How many Draco Malfoys must stumble in darkness, searching for redemption that should have been part of their education? Leadership must be taught, it must be modelled, and Slytherin, for all its pride in ambition, never taught the one skill that could have redeemed its legacy: the ability to use power wisely. Until it does, it will remain a house of shadows. Brilliant, dangerous, but tragically incomplete. Number 28. Why is internal discrimination tolerated within Slytherin? In the dungeons of Hogwarts, where shadows stretch long and secrets fester in the damp stone walls, lies the house that wears its pride like armor, Slytherin. Known for ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness, the students of this house have carved for themselves a legacy of distinction and division. But beyond their disdain for Gryffindor or their endless rivalry with Hufflepuff, there lingers a far more corrosive dynamic. One seldom discussed even in the most critical analysis of Hogwarts culture. For within Slytherin, where blood purity is held above all, lies a hierarchy so rigid and cruel that even its own members fall victim to the doctrine they are supposed to champion. It is a house that eats itself from the inside, and somehow no adult ever stops to ask why. Draco Malfoy's very first interaction with Harry Potter sets the tone for this internal Slytherin elitism. Before even being sorted, Draco feels compelled to warn Harry against befriending the wrong sort, by which he means those without noble, wizarding lineage. You'll soon find out that some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort, he says in Philosopher's Stone. That remark is not just a product of his parents' indoctrination, it is the culture of Slytherin made flesh. Draco's attitude is not isolated, it thrives because it is encouraged, not challenged, by his peers and mentors alike. Within the house itself, those who do not fit the mould suffer in silence. Slytherins like Blaise Zabini, who is of mixed heritage but happens to have an exceptionally beautiful and widowed mother, are begrudgingly tolerated. Blaise's aloofness is not merely personality, it is self-preservation. He avoids entanglements with Malfoy's crowd, often refusing to participate in the more overt acts of cruelty. In Half-Blood Prince, he mocks Ginny Weasley by saying, "I wouldn't touch a Weasley if she paid me." Yet this coldness masks a deeper truth. He lashes out to maintain his status, lest he be targeted himself. The hierarchy in Slytherin forces its members to perform cruelty to avoid becoming victims. One of the most striking omissions in the Hogwarts system is the lack of adult intervention. Severus Snape, head of Slytherin for years, is aware of the dynamics within his house. He sees Draco tormenting students, he knows the whispers that surround the children of Muggle-borns even within his own common room. Yet he does nothing. His favoritism for Slytherin masks his silence over its moral decay. In Order of the Phoenix, when Snape confronts Harry, he shows immediate scorn for the boy's defiance, but shows no concern when Draco insults Hermione for being Muggle-born. "You're not worth half of her," Ron had once said to Malfoy, but Snape never would. In Slytherin, silence is complicity. And what of the sorting hat? Each year, it sorts students into houses that define the rest of their lives, but does it ever reconsider whether Slytherin's emphasis on purity and ambition creates a petri dish for bullying and social Darwinism? When it sings its song in Goblet of Fire, the hat warns of a Hogwarts divided, but never speaks against the blood purity prejudice it helps foster by sorting children who already hold supremacist views into one echo chamber. It says, "Though condemned I am to split you, still I worry that it's wrong." Yet even that self-awareness leads to no change, no shift in sorting practices. Tradition remains unchallenged, even when it breeds cruelty. Take, for instance, Theodore Nott, whose presence is subtle in the books but revealing. He is the son of a Death Eater, yet he is described as solitary and introspective, unlike the boisterous cruelty of Crabbe and Goyle. Nott does not seem to belong to Malfoy's inner circle, not because he is any less pure in blood, but because he does not worship the same social games. In Slytherin, deviation from the dominant ideology of superiority is enough to place one lower on the ladder. Individuality is punished unless it echoes the house's core dogma. Nott, though acceptable in lineage, is relegated to the periphery because of his independence. The house eats its own. Regulation of behaviour theoretically should fall under the purview of Hogwarts staff. Yet Dumbledore, ever wise and watchful, allows Snape to manage his house in total autonomy. In Chamber of Secrets, when Draco calls Hermione a filthy little mudblood during a public Quidditch practice, no consequence follows from authority. The outrage is expressed only by Ron, whose hex backfires on himself. Adults remain silent. It is as if the hatred so deeply ingrained is expected and normalized within certain bounds. As long as it remains within Slytherin, it is invisible. The house that values cunning above all else also teaches its students to weaponize hierarchy. Daphne Greengrass and Pansy Parkinson, two girls of presumed pure-blood status, form a clique that thrives on exclusion. Pansy, in particular, enjoys mocking others not just outside her house but within. Her role is less about loyalty to Slytherin and more about policing its ranks. Anyone beneath her socially, based on family, looks, wealth, or demeanour, is fair game. She often acts as Draco's echo, repeating his insults and laughing on cue, but her real talent lies in identifying weakness and exploiting it. For a house supposedly defined by unity and loyalty, Slytherin offers little protection to its own. This internal cruelty shapes the students' personalities. Children who might have developed empathy are taught to repress it. Consider the unnamed Slytherin students who never speak in the books, the ones whose names are never called in duels or pranks. Their silence is the most tragic evidence of all. They are the ones who never reach the upper echelons of house politics, who live under the rule of louder, crueler peers. They do not rebel, they retreat into quiet submission. Their education in Hogwarts is not one of magic, it is one of survival. It is also telling that the house produces so many Death Eaters, not just because of shared ideology, but because of fear. Loyalty to Voldemort promises power and protection, two things the Slytherin hierarchy uses as currency. If your bloodline is not sufficient, your only chance of rising in status is through allegiance to darker forces. This is not ideological commitment, it is desperation, the result of years of internal ranking and humiliation. Hogwarts, knowingly or not, becomes a training ground for future oppressors by failing to protect its most vulnerable students. Even in the Battle of Hogwarts, when Slytherin students are given the chance to stay and fight, they hesitate. Pansy Parkinson immediately demands they hand over Harry to Voldemort. While this scene paints Slytherin as cowardly, the deeper truth is that their loyalty has always been transactional. In a house where worth is measured by power and status, what use is bravery if it offers no reward? Those raised to believe in dominance do not suddenly rise. to defend equality. It is not cowardice, it is indoctrination. The damage is not limited to student years. The ripple effects last into adulthood. Characters like Regulus Black, initially a follower of Voldemort, later rebel, but too late. His attempt to destroy a Horcrux is noble, but it comes after years of indoctrination, raised in the shadows of pure-blood superiority. Even those who eventually awaken to its poison often do so after irreversible choices. The house not only breeds division, it cripples moral development.